Well, hello everybody. I'm Hal,
And I'm Melanie.
and we want to welcome you to another episode of Making Biblical Family Life Practical. So, a few weeks ago, we read a story about, there's a biblical connection right here, a museum in Israel where a family with a small boy had been visiting, and this small child accidentally broke a 3,500-year-old jar. It was a great big clay container, and normally they're found in pieces, but they had excavated this one intact, and it was really embarrassing as well as historically tragic. But he wasn't doing anything bad. He wasn't misbehaving. He was just curious what was inside this jar, and he reached into the display and leaned it over a little bit to try to look inside, and over it came. And it was one of those things that make parents just shudder.
For real.
That feel of but for the grace of God go our family. But
yeah. Well, there was a lot of discussion about it on our Facebook page, and I really struggle with this because we have taken our kids so many places, really all over the world, that
literally,
that children don't normally go. And I really appreciate it when places welcome families. I think there's a lot to be said for little kids being able to see things and getting a broad view of the world. But if you don't want to have one of those sinking feelings in the pit of your stomach because something horrible has happened, you as the parent need to think things through in advance.
that is so true. And that's it's one of those things. It's like childproofing. You want to reduce the temptations or the hazards in the environment for the small child, but they still require supervision and training and preparation. Everybody wants to cultivate this young life and protect it in the process. So we just got to thinking about it. What are some things that we have done? Because we decided when we first started having children that we really wanted our family life to continue and our children to just be wrapped into what we were doing. And
we've homeschooled from the beginning.
Right.
And so if we went to an event, to a historic site, to a museum, all our kids were with us. Now, if you don't know us very well, we have 8 children,
Yes.
6 boys and 2 girls, 6
Right.
boys in a row. And so, we were a pretty big crowd with a lot of randomizers present.
Yeah, and the first 6 were boys. And if you think that didn't set off alarms when we walked into a place.
Yeah.
But, we didn't have disasters. Because I think there's some things that you can do to prepare your child to interact in an adult world, in a grown-up world, in a way that, is respectful to both to their limitations and to the world that they're interacting with.
Well, and preparing for the field trip in advance, we're going to call it a field trip.
Right.
It can be a family visit somewhere.
Yeah.
But preparing for these events in advance can mean not just that you won't have to have that sinking feeling that you may be asked to pay for a 3,500-year-old jar. Now,
Right.
They weren't. The museum was very gracious about it.
Right.
But, that I just cannot imagine the horror that the parents felt.
Oh, gosh. Yes.
But also, everybody's going to enjoy it a lot more. Your kid's going to enjoy it more. The people around them are going to enjoy it more. The docents will enjoy it more. And, I realized this very early on. I remember one of our very early experiences going on a field trip. All our kids were very young.
Right.
And we went to a museum, and there was a school having a field trip there at the same time. And the children that from the school were literally running through the museum, just hitting every button they saw, moving everything they could touch.
Not even stopping to see what it did.
No.
They just pushed a button and run on.
It made the day miserable for everyone else in the museum because, it was just, you were afraid they were going to knock things over. They were afraid you were going to knock you over, and they weren't getting anything out of it.
And this is, by the way, this is not an American problem. I mean,
No.
I remember when I was in college, I studied in Germany for a summer, and we were in a big monastery somewhere in southern Germany, and there was a school choir singing, and there were just like angels. The music was absolutely beautiful. And then they let these kids loose. They were like middle schoolers or maybe junior high school students. And they start rummaging around and running in the church, and the teachers are hissing at them in German, which I could understand. They're saying, "This is not a gymnasium." I said, "Well, no, it is not." And so it's not just an American sort of problem. It is a problem of parents and kids who are not prepared and trained properly. So, I think one of the things is just recognizing that they are children. Children are curious. They do have short attention spans. They're not going to be able to get as much of the stimulation we might get from reading long articles on a museum exhibit.
Well, I think part of it is to help them to know where they're going beforehand. One of the things that we found really helpful is to do some research.
Right.
So that they know what they're going to go, why they're going on this field trip, and what they can expect to see.
Yeah.
So they know why it's important to pay attention.
Yeah.
And that doesn't, nowadays, that was a lot harder 30 years ago.
Oh my gosh, it's so easy now.
It's so easy. You can just Google it, and so many resources come up. And so we talk about where we're going to go, and we talk about what it's going to be like, and the things that they should look for. You can look, what are the most famous exhibits at this museum, and prep your kids to look for those exhibits.
Right.
Kind of like a scavenger hunt.
Yeah.
But if they know why this is important, what they're going to see is important, they're going to pay more attention. Now, I'll grant you that is harder now than it was 30 years ago, because kids have a really short attention span right now.
So do we parents sometimes.
Yeah, devices, phones, all those things have taught us to have instant gratification. And I really highly, highly, highly recommend that you don't allow your kids to use the phone or the iPad or whatever when you're at an exhibit, when you're at a museum or at a historic site. And I know it's tempting because you want them to hush. I've seen this on field trips where one child is constantly nagging his mom. "Mom, can I use my pad? Can I use my pad? Can I use my pad?" And Mom's saying, "Hush, hush, hush." Yeah. And I know that she's thinking it'd be easier if I just handed him the pad.
Yeah.
But he wouldn't get anything out of it, and he wouldn't know why he needed to pay attention the next time he went somewhere.
Well, that's kind of a life skill there, to say there are things in real life that we need to experience without a screen in the middle. Yeah. Whether that's Thanksgiving dinner with the family, or talking with a relative in person, or going to visit a historic site. I mean, you're there to experience what you can only experience in real life. And that's something that we need to model first, and also talk about with our kids, to explain this is why we're not going to be using our digital devices while we're inside or while we're at this location, because we want to experience it for ourselves. And we can do the research later. We can do the research before, but right now the research is what's coming through our eyes, our ears, the experience of it.
We first noticed Asher was having difficulties with learning when he was about 5. We ended up having him privately tested, and of course it came back that he was dyslexic. It was super overwhelming. There was just list and list of all these programs. So we started talking to people and felt like everybody was just saying something different. I hired the lady that had tested him. She tutored him for a year, one-on-one, 4 days a week. She came to me and was like, "It's not working." Thankfully, she had met Dr. Conway. She just highly suggested the Morris Center. From there, my husband and I got in touch with the Morris Center, and Dr. Conway spoke with us over the phone, and you could just really tell his expertise in dyslexia.
Enroll your child or teenager at themorriscenter.com, or for virtual sessions, visit nowprograms.com.
And I think that if kids are prepared in advance, they know where they're going, they know why they're going there. And we always encouraged each of our kids to ask at least one question.
Yeah, that's really good when you have a tour group.
Yes.
Or like a field trip organizer.
To try to think of a good question to ask, because it's really hard on the docents. I've been on field trips like this. where the docent's trying to get the kids engaged and everybody's sitting there staring at them dumbly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's hard to give an interesting field trip when nobody's interacting. And so we always encourage our kids, try to think of at least one good question to ask, and then ask that one question, and then be quiet and let other people ask a question.
Yeah, if you got kids that are really, really outgoing kids who do have a lot of curiosity, it is important as a social thing to say, let others have an opportunity to ask their questions, because you're not here to impress the museum. You're here to learn, and other people are here to learn too. And what we told our kids sometimes was, okay, I know that you know all of this before because we visited or whatever. So ask one question, and then if they throw it open for the group, pick a number, count to 20 before you try to raise your hand. You know, to give other people a chance to get in there first. Okay, and so that's good manners there.
And I think it's important to think in advance and corral the kids who can't control themselves. Mm-hmm. You know, I remember going through many museum tours with a baby in a sling and a toddler in a stroller, or sometimes a toddler and the 3-year-old or 4-year-old in a double stroller.
Right.
And the 6 and 8-year-old holding on to the sides of the stroller, to the handlebars, because it's our responsibility to make sure that our kids behave.
Yeah. And
we've been through some places with such fragile and valuable stuff. I remember holding the hands of the baby in the sling, to keep them from touching things and grabbing things.
It's funny, they don't ask permission, they just go.
They just grab it, and they're so fast. Mm-hmm. And if keeping everybody corralled helps, then do it. Give the child in the stroller a soft toy, not something hard enough to cause damage if they throw it, but a soft toy to play with, with their hands while you're walking through. Mm-hmm. Think about it in advance. A wagon works sometimes. I prefer a stroller because you can buckle them in.
Yeah.
But I've seen folks using a wagon for the same thing, because especially if it's one of you with your kids, it's hard to keep an eye on everybody.
Yeah.
And so the ones that can't be trusted to control themselves and stay with you and behave, they need to be corralled. They need to be under control. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, when you do these things, when you prep kids for field trips, when you tell them what to expect, we're going to go to 3 different houses and we're going to learn about this, this, and this. And I want you to look out for these things and be prepared to tell me about it later. Then everybody has more fun. And they know how to behave. Look, I know you have to be quiet a long time.
Right.
But when you get out of here, listen, it's not a bribe if you're rewarding them for doing something good. It's only a bribe if you're rewarding them for doing something bad.
Well, one of the things we found is that if you're working with your children on these things, that they can show some remarkable self-restraint for a time.
Yes.
So, like, if you have trained your children to sit still for church, and you go to the big grown-up service with your children, and they sit there like they're just little saints, and it's wonderful. You just recognize that by noon, their batteries are dead. I mean, all their goodness has been used up, and so you just have to say, after we've had our quiet time, the kids need to stretch and run.
So don't expect them to stand beside you like little angels while you talk to your friends for 45 minutes, or don't expect them to behave while you wait in line to get into the fancy restaurant for an hour and a half.
Right.
They've used up all their good. It's gone. They need to recharge. And in the same way, when they've been to a presentation or a concert, maybe you went to see the Nutcracker, when they get out, you need to plan something like, instead of going to a restaurant, have a picnic at a park so they can run.
Wonderful option.
Yeah, yes. And so they can use up that energy in a good way. And the cool thing is, kids can learn so much more than we think they can. We had most of our kids with us yesterday. We were celebrating one of the kids' birthdays this weekend, and they were talking about their childhood, and they remembered some of the historical site visits we had made when they were very young, and remembered things they'd learned there. Our kids are capable of a lot more than we think they are, but they need preparation. They need us to help them to behave and to learn and to grow, and they need to know why it's important. And we just need to be the adult here. We need to think it through in advance and help them get ready.
You know, we've talked a lot about preparation. There's one other thing which I think is really important. We will very naturally intervene if we see our child starting to do something wrong. You know, say, "Oh, don't touch that," or "Step away from the exhibit," or whatever. You know, we'll intervene at the moment. But it's really good if you, before you go in, like when you get to the parking lot, you say, "Okay, we're going to go in here. Here are the rules."
Yes.
You can only you can only look with your eyes. Okay.
Yes.
You cannot look with your hands. So everybody's going to keep their hands together. Maybe even keep your hands in your pockets. It may be appropriate. And we need to be quiet while the tour leader is speaking. You know, you give them some expectations and reminders as you're going in the door.
And then you be a good example to them, because I've got to say that kids who learn with their hands are generally the children of people who learn with their hands. And I cannot tell you how many times I've seen somebody at our booth remind their children. There's these little things for where we've got like some of the Craftsman crate kits open, so you can see them. It says, "Look, don't touch."
Yeah.
And they'll tell their child, "Look, don't touch." See, it says it right there. And then the mama goes and moves everything around. Yeah.
Not even aware of it.
Not even aware that she's doing it. And so we need to control our hands too.
Right.
And to be good examples for our kids.
Yeah. Sometimes the grown-ups are fidgety just like the kids, and that's just a little bit of self-awareness sometimes helps too.
All right, guys,
So,
please go out and rate our podcast so that other people can find it.
Mm-hmm.
Tell people about it, and come visit us at craftsmancrate.com and raisingrealmen.com.
Right.
And anywhere on social media at Raising Real Men or at Hal and Melanie.
And you know what? The weather is great. It's a great time to go out and visit the places. It's coming up in the holiday season, and things are going to be open and decorated and inviting people in. Take the family. Get out there and experience the stuff real life. That would be, what a great gift you can give your kids. And the memories you can build are incredible.
So many happy memories in our family.
Well, look, we appreciate you joining us. Until next time, I'm Hal.
And I'm Melanie.
Thanks for listening.
Bye, y'all.
You've been listening to Making Biblical Family Life Practical with Hal and Melanie Young. If you found this program interesting, challenging, and encouraging, why not join us on the web at halandmelanie.com. That's HALANDMELANIE.com. Or follow us on social media. You can find us on Facebook at Facebook/Hal and Melanie or Facebook.com/Raising Real Men. This program is a production of the Ultimate Homeschool Radio Network. Join us next week when we'll be back to talk about making biblical family life practical. Until then, thank you and God bless you for listening.